huge fusion player. All right, so that chromatic idea is not something that I utilize, and it's not something that I've like dove that deep into. But when you're talking about chromaticism in your scales, right, to give that jazzy sound, it's actually the chromaticism is not going to be in the scale. It's going to be within the chord, in the chord tones. So one really good way to do it is if we just have this E minor, right? This is like the one example that I do the most. We have an E minor. We can do an E minor 7. So what I want you to start with is the arpeggio, the full arpeggio. All right. Then looking at that arpeggio, I want you to start, and you don't, just to make it a little bit easier, maybe not having to do the top string right away, so you're really just focusing on that. Now what you're going to do is, all I'm doing here is outlining that arpeggio, right? But I'm playing the note before, the note after, and then landing on the note. Now this isn't like very practical or usable musically necessarily, right? So that just starts opening up that when you're visualizing, when you're doing your arpeggios, you're visualizing the chromatics next to those notes in the arpeggio. Cool. So you got it. So now this is the way to start applying it and start, because it's going to take, I mean, I would recommend learning some solos. Oh my God, like Aquarium Rescue Unit. I know that they got a bunch, but I mean, you probably know the guys that you want to sound like. Now, when you're learning their solos, you can kind of see what they're doing and how they're applying it. Like I said, this isn't like a genre that I get super into, so so there's nobody that I really listen to that utilizes it. But how you're going to do it now, when you want to start applying it a little bit, is if you take that arpeggio and you think, all right, I'm going to do first two notes in the arpeggio. I'm going to do the next two notes above the arpeggio. So instead of it's right? And it already starts developing that sound. Now the next two notes in the arpeggio I'm going to do on, and the next two I'm going to do low. All right, so super weird, but now you're starting to kind of get that sound. Just in that going that slowly, you start saying like, oh, okay, that has that feeling to it. Now just doing two on, two ahead, two on, two behind, note-wise, is going to sound a little structural, where it's not going to like really come through that way. But that is how you're going to start thinking about it, and which ones you like using a little bit more, if you like the kind of like the upper tones or the lower tones. So anything in there, you can start utilizing. One thing that I love doing when people start getting into chromatics is just to get their ear. I love doing this. Is if we just take like an A minor. Right? If we go up the scale and I have them sliding into it, so like this is my favorite thing to do. All right, so and that is, I'm using that as a chromatic, not as a flat 6. So all I'm doing is just jumping up the pentatonic, and then right there I'm sliding up, continuing the pentatonic a note higher, sliding back down, playing those two notes in the pentatonic, and just a little chromatic there at the end, right? And that gives you that feeling of moving that up and then back, right? And that's just a little bit easier to grasp because you're using the pentatonic, which is a little bit more known to all of us, a little bit more muscle memory to all of us than the arpeggios. But now it's about picking those arpeggios and deciding like 3 notes on, and then 2 notes behind, and then 2 notes on. You know what I mean? And mixing up the numbers as much as you can. Like that. Then let's do like 3 on, 2 behind. Then slide into the right one, and then end on 1 behind. You know what I mean? Like really mixing those up is what's going to help. especially if you can play your arpeggios super quickly, it'll just take a little bit of brain training. You know what I mean? Like maybe one of these days I should really sit down and start learning some of that stuff. If that helps, dude, I really hope that worked. Actually, you said, let's see, the biggest problem that I'm trying to pass is that I can't find a way to apply licks from solos into my playing. To do some exercises so I can add easier to those ideas. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, try it. Also, don't forget that if you're having a tough time integrating licks into your solos, it might not be all of that practical to be getting into some of these heavier concepts like arpeggios and moving chromatics necessarily. It might be better to try and go in the other direction and learn some really simple melodic concepts. And then when you have that built up, and it seems like you're already learning this vocabulary of chromatics and arpeggios, then when you put those two together, it's like completely unstoppable. But the only reason that I say that, and Bruce, I'm saying this without obviously having any idea how you play, is if we have something simple and the person isn't able to come up with really simple melodic ideas that are at least somewhat listenable with fewer notes in the pentatonic, adding more notes and adding more advanced concepts is going to dilute that solo and actually make it sound worse and not make it sound better. So that's why you kind of like start with this musical, rhythmic, melodic understanding, and then as you're going through, you're kind of grabbing all of these all of these like concepts, and that's something that we see all the time where somebody doesn't yet really understand how to utilize the pentatonic, and already they're starting to talk about modes and modes and modes, and we can get into modes, we can learn them as far as how to apply them and how to use the numeric system, and this one has a flat 7 and this one has a natural 6 and this is we can do all that. That's fine for learning, but if there's not an applicable way to utilize just a small group of notes, more notes and more heavier musical concepts is actually going to hurt your guitar solos.